You're good. Thank you, Josh.
Great.
Perfect. So let's dive into lead scoring overview. Now, I know, everybody is on mute, but, this is more like I would like to know how many on this session have lead scoring implemented. So while you do that, I'm going to just set the stage and say what all we do before we start thinking about lead scoring. It's more like as a marketer, we create websites, we invest a lot of time and effort on content, white paper, blog, do email marketing, and capture as much as possible a lot of information about our prospect, buyers, the leads, what we call in Marketo. So while we are doing that, what we are getting in Marketo is so many different touch points. What that means is if somebody visits the website, yeah, Marketo tracks it. If somebody fills out a form, provides some information, we get it. So all this we are doing, what is happening in the background is each and every buyer, each and every lead, whether known or unknown, is leaving behind a digital footprint, which we need to analyze, and that only helps us to give these points you see on these leads or prospects. And that lead scoring helps us differentiate between what is qualified and what is not yet. So this is how we get. But is it as simple as what you see over here? Certainly not. So what essentially is a lead scoring? Why do we need it? Let's try to answer that question. So lead scoring certainly ensures a smooth transition of leads from marketing to sales. Now, carefully, I included sales, and that's what we need to do. Lead scoring is not like, yeah, as a marketer, we need to do it. It's a teamwork. So it's a combination of two things. One is a demographic lead scoring, which is our qualification lead scoring, and the other is behavior, which is an interest level lead scoring. We cannot do that just with one. If we say, okay, I got this list of people, and I can score based on number of companies. No, we need to know whether they are interested in us and whether we are interested in them. That's the right balance to get to a good lead score. So in other words, what I say is demographic or qualification. You might have heard explicit, which means how much you are interested in them, and implicit, how much they are interested in you. And we'll dive deeper into both of these in a couple of next slides. So let's talk about the qualification. So the way qualification, or I would say explicit scoring, works, typically by answering these two questions. You can ask yourself a question. Are you interested in them? You got a list. Maybe you went to a trade show. You got their job title, company size, first name, last name, email address, phone number, maybe state, country, all those things. Now, after looking at that, do you think you're interested in them? That's one way to get to what you need in demographic lead scoring. Or the other question you may ask, can you define your ideal prospect? What do you want in your ideal prospect to become a buyer? Next is, these are a couple of questions. What is your qualification criteria? And what I look at is, typically, it's very simple, is do you have BANT criteria defined? What BANT means is budget, authority, need, timeline. We all know that, pretty straightforward. Now, when we define that, it is, you can slice it a little further and say, okay, what is the time frame for you to buy from us? What is the company size, industry, need, pain, ecosystem, role? And you can add your own. Every company has their own way of slicing and dicing on how to define their perfect persona. So after you have all this, the next step is you need to start collecting that information using forms or other sources. We are using Marketo, so it's Marketo forms, and use progressive profiling to slowly and gradually get this information. And here are some of the examples which you can think about. These are generic ones. Think about collecting that information. Job title, I would leave it more like a text, but make sure you have a standardized value tied to it, job function or level. Industry, again, make it a standard list. Company name, yeah, good to have. Company size, again, highly recommended to have a standard list of range of company size. Email address, personal or corporate, whichever makes sense for your company and the country. Now, when we are collecting this information, we say, okay, we got this information, so I can score on those. But remember, there are some limitations to this information that we get. Number one limitation is poor quality of this information. Now, why do you think we get a poor quality? The reason being, this is based on Marketing Sherpa. You see this chart. What it tells us that not everybody gives you the accurate information. And the reason is they don't trust you probably at that point of time, or they don't want too many calls to be on their cell or work number, whatever they want to provide. So you get a lot of junk information at that time. So bad information can be especially inaccurate for a lot of other reasons. So that's why we cannot totally depend on those and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to score on those only. However, we can overcome this limitation because, we still get a lot of information that Marketo captures for us. And this is where we can get a lot of information from. The inferred information that Marketo captures when anybody comes to our website, opens an email, or does anything on a digital footprint. So here is the input from IP. We can always gather that information from which IP address, which geography, which region that person is coming, and the data quality. And this is, today Michael would share with you how we can do this. It's a data quality where you can always take away some points if somebody has in first or last name 1, 2, 3, 4, and all those Mickey Mouse and all those, junk names. Personal email address, you may or may not, but usually, for B2B, yeah, we highly recommend taking away some points for personal email addresses. And if somebody gives you all the information, you can add more points. So that's on the inferred. And then what happens to the rest? We got the inferred, and we probably didn't get the accurate information about the company size, number of employees. Now, there are so many data augmentation tools available. And in Marketo, especially, we used data.com, and which was Jigsaw. That's what we changed over here. Now, if we have that, we will have to use data.com, and you see that we can get that information over here. So Salesforce did not have this information, but data.com provided us enhanced that data. So let's move on to number 2, the interest. So qualification helped us knowing how much we are interested in them. Are they a good fit for us? However, for this one, it's now our time. So we can say how much we are interested in them. And if you look at this picture, we have, when we go out for shopping, it's very easy to say if somebody is interested in buying this product. You can see in the physical world. But what happens when it is in the virtual world? Can sales see it? Yeah, probably yes, based on the digital body language. And that's what we capture in Marketo. And scoring based on that is what becomes interesting, because then the more they score based on all these behaviors, better they are for us. And typical interests we can capture when they are on our website, number of visits, how recently and all that, from activities, download of resources, how many times they have opened the emails, and any event participation. And here are some of the examples, and totally, we have done hundreds of lead scoring implementations, and, I highly recommend think big, but start small. And this is the smallest set of behavior activity which you can think about. Next is, implementation. We got all this information which is being captured in Marketo. Of course, we have to set up the base, but now we need to start implementing it.
Yes, so implementation. Really, next slide. There are a lot of steps to implementation. Lead scoring has to be really thought out well. It's going to be effective and helpful for passing marketing qualified leads over to sales, and for sales to feel confident that they're getting, pretty qualified leads that are, going further down the sales process and really ready to talk to a salesperson. So there's often combination scores based on behavior and demographics, where we have a qualification level that might be high, medium, or low, and an interest level that might be high, medium, or low. Ideally, we have people who are in the A section or possibly the B section who tend to be more on the qualified and more on the interest level, right? So you could be highly qualified. You're the VP of marketing and at a particular size company, but if you're not interested, there's really no reason for sales to talk to you, right? But if you're heavily active on the site, you're downloading case studies and testimonials, you're attending events and interacting with your company's experts, you're probably going to range in the B or A range on the interest level. So if we continue, that's one aspect you need to think about is what score range is going to reflect that qualification level. Qualification being, are you in the right target market? Interest being, are you actually interested in having a conversation? Usually what I recommend people do is one of these 7 items. At the top of the list, which would be really awesome, is analyze the data from won and lost opportunities to determine a prediction about what kind of leads are going to be qualified. There are a lot of good companies out there who can do this for you using a model. You can also try to do it yourself, and there are various statistical methods to help you do that. Generally what you would do is say, okay, give me everybody who won last year and give me everybody who lost last year. Basically people who made it to sales. And, and are there differences between them in terms of demographics, behaviors before the opportunity and behaviors after the opportunity. So if you're really going to do this, you might want to hire a vendor to help you manage that automatically. But again, you could do it yourself. You can also take a look at rejected lead data to determine those possibilities. If you go back. Again, this requires some statistical spreadsheet work, but you could say, if you've got a good feedback mechanism that you've built into your lead life cycle, you say, okay, if we send an MQL to a salesperson, sales can reject that person and recycle them. They could say they're not ready. They could say they're a student and totally not qualified. They could say something like, well, this is just trash data. So you could sift through that and say, okay, well, definitely the people who exhibit certain characteristics are really bad, and we should give them low scores or negative scores. That will help you as well. You can take a look at your buyer personas, which is always a good idea in this process, and say, who are the target people? What are their titles? What are their company types? What are their industries? Things like that. And say, these are the groups of people in terms of demographics that we would definitely want sales to look at. Now, that doesn't mean that that particular lead is interested yet, but this can help you say, okay, we know this group of people are people we want to talk to. They tend to buy, and then you can look at their behaviors and say, okay, buyer persona A is exhibiting interest. You can also look at existing sales funnel stage data if you have any. You could do the smoke-filled room technique, which is basically the sales VP and the marketing VP and you get together in a room and just make up numbers. You would be surprised how often that actually happens. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you can't spend the time or the money to develop predictive scoring, start with something. Make a fairly reasoned judgment about what a click is worth to you, what a webinar attendance is worth to you. And that actually works okay most of the time, but usually after about a year, year and a half, most people start to question the model, and that's when you want to start looking at more predictive analytics. You can also conduct a focus group, which at least helps the sales team feel that.
But at least you can get into the thing. I can't even get into the thing. It's just like, really?
Matter, maybe you want to keep that. I don't know why it's breaking up. But. So you can have a focus group, bring in all the salespeople, have a good conversation with them, get them to rank behaviors and demographics with you, and then decide on the score. The other way to do that is to really just survey the entire sales team, because I've done that before. Just say, here are the behaviors, here are the demographics. What would get you excited to call this person on an individual level? And then you force rank those and try to figure out what's most important to a salesperson and then score on that. And we can go on to the next step. So once you have all that data, then you can put in actual scores. This spreadsheet's kind of missing the other thing, which would be the rank of the particular behavior or demographic field. But you would just put in scores, and you'd set up this spreadsheet as a preparation before you enter this into Marketo. Right? So we have the name of the campaign, roadshow registers, roadshow attends, how many points we will give for each behavior, whether or not we want to give that behavior an interesting moment, how often that score should occur. Right? So a registration for a roadshow should happen every time. We know that probably maybe only happens once a month or less. Something like an email open or an email click, some people do it every time. Some people might do it once per hour or once per day, depending on the email volume. Because someone could click several times on an email and potentially get scored really high for not doing a lot. So once you have that, you can continue to the next slide. And I don't think I have a really good picture of a program here yet. Almost without fail, you want to have centralized scoring. That means you have one program and one set of campaigns running scoring and listening for certain changes throughout the system. I've seen some people set up what I call local scoring, which would be done at the program level and would say, okay, well, if someone clicks an email X, give them 2 points. There's almost never any reason to have a custom score like that. So always centralize that. Never let anyone else add scores anywhere else in the system. Trust me, you will regret doing that eventually when your whole lead flow is messed up. So what you do is you create a program, call it scoring. Sometimes I put a date on it to say this is a scoring program for 2015. You will use some tokens, which we'll talk about, and that will make it easier to change the scores. You'll organize the folders and the campaigns, and then you will use that spreadsheet to create all of those campaigns, the smart lists, the flows, and the schedule. Typically, behaviors are going to be trigger campaigns, or changes in data values will be triggers. Demographics, some updates, and occasionally a behavior would be a batch campaign. It is possible to do demographics as a trigger, and there are some good reasons to do that sometimes. But you want to be careful with not having too many triggers. And this is what the Marketo default scoring program looks like, just to give you a feel for the fact they're tokens. There's a special score token. You drag that in, you use +2 or -2 or equal to. And then all you have to do is drop that in to the flow step, which I think is on the next page. Right. So this way you don't have to go into every single campaign if you ever decide to change a score. Right? So if clicking on an email requires 2 points initially and then you decide to change it to 1 point, all you have to do is go into the token and change the token. Also here we can see that if we want to have score math where you have behavior, demographic, and a total lead score, you would have to do 2 flow steps, right? So you increment behavior score by 2, and then you have to increment lead score by 2. So just keep that in mind when you build your programs if you have more than one. And definitely have a communication strategy. Ideally, the salespeople were involved in creating these scores, and they feel like this is good. It's always bad to just spring scoring on people. They tend to ignore it or they don't like it. Keep them up to date on changes and when someone will get sent over to them. Right? What score does it take? And also talk to them about flames and stars. Right? Flames is how quickly has someone changed in score relative to all other leads in the system. And stars is how highly does this lead score relative to all other leads, right? So if my lead has 100 points, but everybody else in the database has an average of 5,000 points, the 100-point lead is going to score very low and have 1 star instead of 3 star. And just keep that in mind and make sure that the salespeople understand that.
Are you hearing anything? This is so bad. It's worse than ours.
Madhu, are you there? Madhu, I think you're muted if you're talking.
Yeah, hi. So now let's talk about the rollout. So thank you, Josh, for that overview of how to create that in Marketo. So after we have done all this hard work in Marketo, we got our spreadsheet as a starting point to define our behavior lead scoring, gave it a weightage, demographic lead scoring, all the campaigns and programs are ready. Now rollout comes with 2 things. One is Marketo rollout, which is easy to do after all that definition. The other is sales and marketing rollout. What that means is you got the lead scoring all set up in Marketo, and leads would be synced to your sales or CRM system based on the criteria you both agreed for. So you should have a unified definition of a lead, that to what is a sales qualified or marketing qualified leads. So that agreement needs to be there. So when you start sending hot leads, which you can call MQL, sales should know why it is MQL, because it got 100 points, because it got 20 points on website or behavior activity, 30 points on job title and all those things. So based on that, they should know. So rollout is more important for the success of the team, and what we need at that time is a sales team training. So it's like anytime you're doing lead scoring implementation and rolling it out, you need to do a session before that so that you get the inputs from the sales team. And then once you're ready to roll it out, I highly recommend, and we do that a lot of times, we share what they should expect. And essentially, you also need the feedback from them. Lead scoring is an iterative process. It's not like you're done. You got Marketo, you got it started, and you did the lead scoring first time, and you think, yeah, it's done. It's not like integration, you do with your CRM. It's an evolving. You get a feedback from sales team, and you tweak it as you move forward. And based on, hundreds of projects we have done, every 6 months, you should revisit your lead scoring. And what does it mean? In revisit, you should audit the entire system one more time and obtain sales feedback, just lead scoring rules, whether behavior or demographic, and just see where you can tweak it. Analyze your form's question. We talked about demographic or the attribute information you capture. So maybe you're missing on some attributes. You think, yeah, you should know about your prospect or buyer, one more question. So think about those and add to the form. And track opportunity to close ratio. This you would see how intelligently Forward Line is doing today. They did a really nice audit, and Michael Carlson is going to talk about that. So that is going to be very interesting to watch. Now this is some of the best practices. Personally, there are some generic best practices which I would like to share, but again, best practices do change based on what is good fit for your organization. So the very first one is establish a universal lead definition. And it sounds simple, but I've seen it takes a lot of time and a lot of meetings to agree on what is that marketing qualified lead or what is that lead, rather agreeing on the definition of lead at each stage. Then talk to sales team to get qualitative inputs. Most of the time, even though you have lead scoring up and running, you would find sales team saying, oh, leads are not good. They're junk. They're just not a good fit for us. So that closed loop, some kind of a closed loop should be there in CRM so that they can report back to Marketo all the inputs. Use tokens for scalability. This is an absolute one you need to have if you're doing lead scoring. We don't do any lead scoring programs without this, because this would help you to make changes moving forward. Since we are talking about revisiting lead scoring after 6 months, if let's say you have to change a score of one behavior, you don't have to go into each and every one of those. You just go and change the token. Refine score weights based on results. This you would see, how if the lead scoring is not working, your opportunity that you got does not reflect a good lead score, then you better go back and tweak your lead scoring. Or if the bad leads are not getting, if the bad leads are getting good score, or good leads are getting less score. So that's the time you should revisit. The other one, which not everybody starts with, but it's a good idea to have, is to start looking for negative behaviors and correlate it to disqualified leads. Why would you like, let's say, student is not the right job title for your company, you may give them negative points or disqualify them. So start looking for those kinds of things so that you are already aware that, yeah, this lead should get a little less score. Measure system effectiveness and plus routinely audit and make adjustment. The last 2 points is what Michael Carlson is going to talk about right now. But before we go there, let's see how more you can do in lead scoring by these advanced scoring strategies. Score degradation. Score degradation is when, you see a lot of activities happening and somebody came to your website 2 years ago, and after that there has been no activity. And probably that person came to your website and had a score which was a really good score. Let's say relative score was A or 100 points. And after that, no activity. You should start thinking about this strategy, which is score decay or score degradation, which means reduce the score if there has been an inactivity in past 90 days, 30 days, whatever you think is making sense for you. The other one, in case you have multiple product and services, you can start thinking about product scoring. And last one is account scoring as well. You know, I've seen companies give more score to Fortune 1000 companies. Now, in order to do that, the very first thing is you should have a cleaner database so that you have a standardized list of company names. So with that, I would like to forward it to Michael Carlson, who is the VP of Marketing at Forwardline, and he did an absolutely amazing work implementing lead scoring and also auditing and tweaking it further. So I'm going to hand over to Michael. Here you go, Michael.
Why, thank you very much. Thank you also for inviting me to be a participant in today's virtual meeting. It's an honor to be here. What I'd like to do are just a few things. Show you real time, how we implemented lead scoring, give you a little bit of background about who we are, what we do, our customer type, and how it might impact our approach to lead scoring, and then just show you in our Marketo instance itself some of the things that our folks touched on today in actual practice. So Forwardline is a pioneering lender to Main Street small businesses, the typical restaurants, automobile shops, and salons that you'd find on any main street in the United States. And we work with an inside sales model in an industry that really has a lot of feet on the street. And that's one of the reasons why we turned to Marketo in the first place, is to be able to use dynamic content and triggers and different kinds of behavioral attributes in order to communicate proactively and very personally without putting a salesperson in the store. Our leads are derived primarily from direct marketing activities, and we have a lot of them. We delivered over 32,000 leads to sales in the last year alone. And in our 10-year history, we have nearly 500,000 now facially qualified archived non-buyers in our system that we actively remarket to, primarily with Marketo. And then the market's huge. There's over 8 million businesses in the United States that meet our criteria, and we're constantly trying to reach out to them, get them to engage, and then leverage Marketo scoring in order to measure their value of their response and their level of engagement in order to determine when and how exactly to throw them over the fence to sales. So we had to answer the question for ourselves when we, scoring was available to us when we decided to work with Marketo. We said, why score? We took on our Marketo instance about a year ago, and after we had all of our email programs up and running, we found that we had these following issues that we wanted to address. We wanted to make sure that we engaged qualified and active prospects as early on in the sales process as possible. This is your typical marketing captured lead transition into a marketing qualified lead. So we created this marketing engaged lead, a status in the middle of it that is measured specifically on demographic and behavioral scoring, particularly behavioral scoring, and triggered additional communications and customer touch points based upon that, meeting that threshold. We needed to move the needle on our close rate. Over 92% of the marketing qualified leads that we hand over to sales don't close. It's a long and complicated sales process and involves a qualification, underwriting, and acceptance of the deal. And we wanted to make sure that whatever we throw over the fence to sales has the highest possible chance of closing, and that the amount of level of effort and the timeliness of the effort is driven by data and not by guesswork. What does that mean? By scoring, we're able to put forth to our sales team the stars and flames that were mentioned earlier, but also those interesting moments that allow for opportunistic points of contact. And finally, we really wanted to achieve a disciplined and data-driven alignment and targeting of nurturing and sales efforts. So we leverage our lead scoring along with our engagement drip programs in order to have our email nurturing communications be completely aligned with the sales funnel. So we do demographic scoring and behavioral scoring. You'll see some of the demographic scoring variables that were introduced a little earlier in the in the presentation. And we have some additional ones based upon data that we're able to collect or augment, some through data.com and some through the credit bureaus, that allow us to set a demographic score on any lead and leverage that in order to rank those leads as they're given to sales. Some of the things that were mentioned a little earlier about the invalid names we put into place very recently, and we found that very helpful. You'll notice that those are really the only decrement scoring that we have in our model, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is in just a bit. On the behavioral scoring, we have very similar to what we saw in the demonstration earlier. Clicking on links or interacting with an email has certain scores. A particular link that shows their intent to apply has the highest score. A contact us form we've analyzed and found that it's right at the, it shows definite intent to buy. A lead becoming reactivated, or downloading a PDF, or clicking on certain links or pages with certain frequency, leading to a total score. For our purposes, we decided that in the initial rollout, we would give a total maximum value of the demographic score of 60 and behavioral scoring of 60, really just for simplicity's sake and to help us when we do a back-end analysis to validate that our models are working well together. And then we of course, pass over these interesting moments. Our sales team really, really loves to see these, and as a matter of fact, they've implemented the RSS feeds of interesting moments on their screens as they work within their Salesforce environment. And they move alongside our demographic and behavioral models. So it's going to look for data updates. It'll look for web page visits, email activity, or form completions, and pass those on to sales as well. So let's explore. Here is our here's our lead scoring for forward line today. So we have 3 different programs, one that defines interesting moments, one that describes the behavior and the demographics scoring. We'll focus on the behavioral and demographic scoring today. As mentioned earlier, we believe strongly in the use of tokens because it really does make for, first of all, seeing and understanding the relationship of one score element to the next. Very simple, and also just management when you analyze and decide to make adjustments. It's as simple as a click of a button to change a score, and then that score, wherever it's used in any of your scoring-related SMART campaigns, is already updated. Take a look at some of the behavioral interactions that we have that are active. Again, they tie right to the spreadsheet I showed you earlier. Let's just click on one, for example, the form assembly link. So it's a trigger. If it's any link that contains this forward line, the particular link that we're looking for, the flow action is simply uses the token to increase the lead score. And again, it takes 2 to tango, change the behavioral score with the same tokenized value. So again, behavioral scoring is based on email, web, certain reactivation activities. We do also actively decay score, behavioral score, so if there's no activity over a certain time, and because again we have a long sales cycle, that activity is 30 days, it will begin decreasing that behavioral score by a value set in the token, and that value is 10. So the the behavioral score is, as it should be, always a bit of a moving target, and it is an accurate assessment of their activity that we're able to track. Taking a look now at demographic scores, we have a wealth of information that we receive from the various list providers and through data augmentation. So we will score them based upon primarily not only their propensity to accept a sales offer, but be approved in underwriting. So things like their annual sales, how long they've been in business, their propensity to pay their bills on time, as well as how they were scored in our predictive model for approval, are big factors in those demographics scores. But whatever it is that you were able to score on, throw it in there, and it's as simple as a smart list. Again, here it's not a trigger, but a change in a data value running on a batch with just a trigger. Sorry, I skipped the wrong one. The same thing, the flow. Here it's a little bit different in that we're not just adding a score. We're saying if it's in this range, if it's at least $1 million, it's a high score, give it a medium score, or a low score based upon certain values that we defined earlier. And again, 2 to tango, these are repeated here on the demographic score as well. There's several items that we started out with. We initially thought we would give certain lead sources or certain job titles a higher value. We implemented those, and over time we found that they weren't of intrinsic value to us. So, and then at the end of the day, why do it? What's the benefit? So we implemented our lead scoring in Q2 of 2014, and it's immediately we began seeing the delta in the impact on sales efficacy. We saw this key KPI of our sales and marketing effort, the number of submitted applications per merchant associate, really start to climb. Now, I want to give credit to our sales team for constantly improving and training and doing the things that they need to do to move the needle as well. But the ability to score and thereby further engage with additional communications and then prioritize for sales those leads to be worked has resulted in a significant shift, an almost 50% increase in the number of completed applications for each one of our sales associates per quarter. Finally, I wanted to share a little bit about what we've learned. We certainly made some mistakes since implementing our scoring model. I'll show you quickly just how it's not hard to analyze the efficacy of what you're doing, or if your assumptions related to how to score, how to weight are correct or wrong. But what made it easy for us was to start with a program template, and there's quite a few available out on the community. Probably with your implementation, you were given one right there already in your Marketo program. No reason to build it from a blank page. Develop with analysis, not assumptions. We heard this earlier about the smoke-filled back room. It's very easy to put something together based on your initial assumptions, and to be frank, we actually did quite a bit of that, particularly when we looked at industry. And it took us time to realize that those assumptions, in fact, were not correct. Use the KISS approach. The simpler it is in the beginning, the easier it is to measure, and therefore make it very, very impactful. It doesn't need to be complicated, unnecessarily complicated for it to work. We found that it was really effective for us to strive for balance between the total demographic and behavioral scores. That way we didn't have this constant disconnect between the stars and flames as presented to sales. And when something was good on both scores, it was truly a strong lead in terms of its prioritization and its receipt and how fervently our sales team worked it. We recommend that you stay at least initially clear of the muddy waters of decrement scoring. It makes analyzing on the back end what the total relative score is a little bit difficult. As you heard from everybody today, the use of tokens is absolutely critical to not only making it work, but maintaining and really having a visual understanding of how your models are structured. And then, can't say it enough, cultivate at least one, but if you can, several internal champions in sales. Take them all the way through to the ground level of how you're structuring your behavioral scoring models. Get them excited about it. And then when they're successful in their use of the model in order to target, be very vocal about those successes. It was key. It was an absolutely essential element of getting our sales team on board with this data-driven lead scoring process. And then review and optimize with regular frequency. I agree with Madhu. About 6 months is the absolute right time to review, to take a quick look at where your scores are. And just a quick example, I just did this a couple of days ago. We were taking a look at our industries. We simply did, a quick pivot table that said, based on these industries as they're defined in the pick list in Salesforce, what was the preliminary approval rate ranked by industry, and how did that distribution fare with the way that we were scoring them? We actually found that some of those restaurants, which are a huge part of our business, actually didn't belong in the high bucket. They needed to be moved down. There's a bit of a sanity check in that the approval rate on real estate was high. It's because it's a low number. But, honestly, too many of those are disqualified for a business. Took one Salesforce report export and a little bit of score, and you could do this in RCE as well, but 5 minutes to just validate that we were moving on the right track. And that's it.
Great, thank you. It was great, Michael. Nice insight into how you are tracking, auditing, and tweaking it. So, yeah, some of you asked whether you would get this PowerPoint. Yes, we would post it on Marketo LA user group if you're a part of that in LinkedIn, and also we can send it in the thank you email. Any other question we can certainly answer, and here you can reach us at again, Marketo user group, post your questions there as well, or you can reach me at Madhu at Show Me Leads. I'm going to share here. So, or Josh, who is also there, but the email address is Madhu at Show Me Leads. You all got the invite from me. So, I guess if we don't have any questions, we'll end it here. Thank you so much for participating today. And Josh, do you have anything to add?
I'm sorry. I don't really have anything to add here. I think the approach you just saw is a really good one. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask. Otherwise, we'll send out the recording and the slides later.
Great. Yep. Thank you, everyone.